You know, when you're a kid, your toys can do anything, over any obstacle, fly through the air, and they always come out unscathed. Well, turns out that Ford actually built a real-world Bronco that is capable of living out your childhood sandbox adventures. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Michael for Ford Truck Enthusiasts, and this is the 2022 Bronco Raptor. Today, my friends, we are hitting up some trails in the Angeles National Forest. Was in earlier Rower Flats OHV Recreational Park earlier, and I'm not sure if I'm still in it. Might be, I think might just be on some fire trails now. I came up here to talk to you guys about the Bronco and what makes it special. Starting with the chassis, the new Bronco Raptor is supposed to be 50% more rigid than the standard Bronco. It's also got 13 inches of front suspension travel and 14 out back. That is a significant amount more than the Bronco Sasquatch. Everything has been beefed up on this, including the spare tire holder, because this has factory 37-inch tires, BF Goodrich all-terrain TAKO2s, 37-inch factory tires, just like the F-150 Raptor and forthcoming Raptor are. But basically, because that tire is so massive, they had to reinforce the rear door and the spare tire holder and also make clearance for the rear brake light as well. We should also point out that this is a full 10 inches wider than the base, very standard Bronco, and I think it's about 6 inches wider than the Sasquatch, 4 to 6 inches than the Sasquatch. Basically, this thing is almost as wide as the F-150 Raptor, and it is effectively the toughest, tallest, widest, and fastest Bronco ever made from the factory from Ford. Under the hood, as I talked about in my tour video, is a variant of the 3-liter twin-turbo V6 from the Explorer ST. It's making 418 horsepower and 440 foot-pounds of torque. And it is enough to keep this thing climbing the mountains and generally going pretty quick while you're doing it. Now, a disclaimer, the reason I'm recording this video where I am now and not on something more treacherous, I suppose you could say, is because I basically wanted to make sure the audio would be as good as possible. This thing can go anywhere, and I'm sure that on more off-roading focused channels, you're gonna be able to see examples of that. Today I'm doing more, whoa, there we go. Today I'm doing more trail running and kind of mountain climbing, that sort of stuff. It is a little bit smoother compared to some of the heavier dutier stuff they can do, but I think it also exemplifies what the Raptor is capable of, because I think when you think about Raptors and off-roading, the original version of the Raptor, the F-150 first generation, well, it was originally supposed to be a 3rd generation Lightning. It was supposed to be an on-street fast truck. But the legend goes that one of the Ford marketing executives took a look at what their customers were doing with their F-150s in the aftermarket, lift kits and big tires and all that sort of stuff. And they decided to create the world's first basically factory trophy truck. That is something that can go quickly off-road, right? Because most off-roading we have to think about is about low and slow, maneuvering and calculating and getting your approach and departure and breakovers and all those important things. When you're in an F-150 Raptor, you can go 2 or 3 times faster than any other F-150 off-road, factory of course. And it's the same with this thing. This thing, the Bronco Sasquatch does really well up in these fire roads, doesn't really break a sweat, neither does this one, but I'm doing it much, much faster. And as I'm recording this here, the last few times I've come out, I think there's been a couple rainstorms between when I've been here the last time, and the roads are dramatically rougher, more washboard effects, more loose rocks, more visible rocks, all sorts of things. You can kind of, I'm sure you can hear it as we're shaking a little bit here. You know, again, it's not a challenge. This is not like a technique issue. Any off-roader could do this, but I'm doing it, you know, at 20, 30 miles an hour and having a blast doing it, because effectively at the end of the day, when you slap a Raptor badge on something, what Ford is doing is they're allowing you to go fast, right? And that appeals to me as a sports car, muscle car guy, because I'm used to going fast on the road and twisties and turns and hairpins and all that sort of stuff. And here we're finally getting to do it in the off-road. And this thing is just so tough, rugged, and impressive. So what makes the Bronco Raptor and its F-150 Raptor so capable? Well, it really comes down to, again, it's more rigid, but the heart of this system is the Fox 3.1 adjustable adaptive shocks. They are massive. They've got external reservoirs. They are adaptive. They are adaptable, and they are tunable. There are actually 3 different driving modes. You have a normal for kind of all purposes. You have a sport, which stiffens up the suspension and kind of, it slows down the body roll a little bit, a lot more in the F-150 than this. And then of course you have what I'm in now, which is off-road mode, or sometimes depending on the mode you're in here, it's in Baja mode. And basically that is just gives you the full suspension travel, and it basically makes it about as soft as possible. And of course you throw on fat 37-inch tires. That's basically, what is it, like 10 inches of sidewall on these 17-inch beadlock capable wheels from the factory. And you've got yourself a lot of capability. It'll roll over things. These are tough, fantastic tires that have been on every generation of Raptor, although continuously evolving. And you basically get this thing that can soak up the bumps better than almost any other vehicle of its class. It's just really, really fun up here in the mountains. In fact, it's better than the F-150 up here in the mountains because it has a shorter wheelbase, so it's more maneuverable, tighter in the turns, especially when you've got this trail turn assist feature. You basically press a button and it will, if you're going slow enough and at a sharp enough angle, it'll lock one of the rear tires and help you get around obstacles quicker. So it's all sorts of features like that. Of course, you've got locking rear differential, locking front differential. You've got a sway bar disconnect as well. So it's got lots of little toys and tricks in different modes to make it more fun off-road. In fact, let's go ahead and go through those now. I'm just in 4 high here, and this thing is cakewalking up everything. Again, this is not really the biggest challenge that this vehicle is going to face, but it exemplifies one type of driving, and it also basically gives us proof that we can do it a lot faster. So anyway, on to the mode. We're in normal mode here. Heading over to the left, you've got sport mode, tow haul mode, and you've got slippery mode. Each of the different modes do different things. Sometimes you're in 4 high, sometimes you're in 4 low, sometimes you're in 4A, sometimes you're in 2 high. Other side going right, you've got off-road mode, which is 4x4, traction control off, lock the rear diff. You've got the Baja mode, traction control off, 4 high, and it also gives you this front view camera that'll show everything that you're approaching as you're driving at high speeds. And the last mode is rock crawl, which I think, yes, you have to be in. That one is for 4L, and you have to shift into neutral to get into 4L. I'm not gonna really do that here because I do not need it. But what's also interesting is that regardless of what mode you're in, you could also go here on the steering wheel and adjust things like your steering sensation, you know, how tight is the turning. This is electronic steering. So you've got your normal mode, which is very nice and light. You've got comfort mode, which is just basically one finger driving, and you can go up to sport mode, and it makes it feel a little bit more like a sports car. You've also got an R button here, and what that does is that's actually my mode. So basically the way you configure that is you go into the settings, you press, you pick a mode that you like, then you can adjust the steering, the suspension, and the exhaust mode, and then you tap and hold the R button, and that becomes your mode, your my mode, or your R mode, I guess you could call it. Other things we can adjust from the steering wheel are the suspension. You've got normal, sport, and off-road, like I was saying. And then lastly, the other button is exhaust. You've got quiet mode, you've got normal mode, sport mode, and Baja or off-roading. At the end of the day, you guys, if you get to experience a Bronco Raptor off-road, you are about to have one of the funnest experiences that you can get from Ford, hands down. This thing is made to run and jump and play all day long, and it's awesome at it. Now you might be asking yourself, how much does all this off-roading potential and fun factor, does that diminish the on-road driving experience? And the truth of the matter is, no, not at all. Now, to be fair, the Bronco Raptor is a little bit floppy. Here I'm in sport mode, so this is the tightest version of the suspension. And it's a little roly-poly, especially compared to even the F-150 Raptor. But this thing is fun to drive and assured. And let's be honest, the joke is, right, is that most people are going to be driving these around town, right? They're going to end up as mall crawlers. garage queens. And so this thing is absolutely going to slay suburbia. Forget about bad asphalt, forget about speed bumps in your way. You can just fly over anything. Saturday in Los Angeles. Boo! And let's not forget that because this is a big, giant, boxy SUV, it's really practical. And it's not as big as the F-150, of course, but you've got room for about 4 adults, relatively comfortable, 5 in a pinch. You can fold the seats down, go to Home Depot, do all that sort of stuff. Grocery store runs no problem. My family, earlier this week, we did a little 3-day kind of weekend adventure. Luggage for 4 people in a stroller and snacks and a bunch of stuff all in the back while we all sat without bags or anything in this area. So yeah, it's a big, nice SUV. It's really practical. It can maneuver everywhere. And again, unlike the F-150, since it's got a shorter wheelbase, it actually fits in parking spaces despite the fact that it's wider. Despite all the many things that I love about this new Bronco Raptor, there are a few things that I should mention that one could consider as flaws or reasons why you might not want to purchase this particular vehicle. Number one, I think it's a little under-braked. You know, obviously not dangerous or anything like that, but I think the brakes are a little bit small compared to the weight and size of the vehicle. Number two, I think despite the fact that it's got a ripping turbocharger engine that keeps you up at speed while you're driving, I think it's a little underpowered, particularly with 37-inch tires, 5,700 pounds. You know, particularly from a standstill, this thing doesn't exactly get going right away because you've got, like, you know, turbo lag and all the rotational mass and all those different things. And so personally speaking, I think that it would have been better if Ford had gone with the oh wow, hold on one sec. Gonna go over here. Whoa, okay, that's woo. Looking over the edge of a cliff. You know, in a perfect world, I think the Bronco could have gone 2 different ways. It could have similar power with the 5-liter Coyote V8, and you have that 392 Wrangler appeal. You have that old school Bronco appeal of the Ford V8 and all the glorious sounds that it makes. I think that would be super duper amazing. But if we're being honest, if it wants to keep up with its bigger F-150 brother, which is faster despite weighing a lot more, Ford should have gone with the 3.5, either standard or high output version of the EcoBoost, because that thing is, I know it gets a lot of hate, and I really don't like the way it sounds either, and I don't really love the way that this one sounds, but the 3.5 EcoBoost is a total beast. I drove it in the Tremor, the standard output, the high output in the Raptor 37, and it really, really moves that heavy truck with all that torque, over 500 pound-feet of torque. So it's definitely a better engine, and I think it would have been better here. Oh, also speaking of the F-150 Raptor, it's worth pointing out that the Bronco Raptor does not feel the same at all while you're driving. This is going to be a weird thing to say about Raptors, but this is a lot less refined. You remember when you were a kid and you used to sit on the school bus seat directly above the rear wheel and you'd kind of bump out and bounce over everything? Driving in the Bronco Raptor is a bit like that, to be honest. And that comes down to the shorter wheelbase. So you just kind of feel everything more. It's not super uncomfortable or bad by any means. It's just you feel a lot more, you know, longer road trips or all day off-roading. I think you'd kind of, it'd be a little bit more punishing, whereas the F-150 Raptor is just like, you know, floating on a cloud. It is like being on a 70s Lincoln, you know what I mean? Old school. Other things to note between this and the F-150 Raptor is just that there's a lot more noise. And of course, that is because this is a convertible. Yes, there is a hardtop and there is some insulation. Regardless, more wind noise. The stereo isn't quite as good. You know, it doesn't have the 45 speakers that the B&O Unleashed does in the F-150. Again, because that has a roof. You can put speakers other places. It has more sound ending. It's a more rigid chassis because it's not a convertible, and it has a longer wheelbase. All things that in the F-150 version of the Raptor make the ride, I would argue, perfect. Here, you're just gonna feel it a little bit more. This is your weekend toy in addition to being able to do practical on-road things as well. And last but not least, I think the elephant in the room here is the sticker price. Again, this is $81,000, starts at 70. You know, that's what, $10,000, $15,000 from a pretty loaded Bronco with the Sasquatch package. Earlier this year, we reviewed the Bronco base Sasquatch, which had almost no options except the Sasquatch package, and that was like $45,000. And so I guess my kind of takeaway in that regard is that prices of trucks and cars have gone crazy over the last decade. I mean, forget about the last 2 years that made things even more complex, but you know, just the last decade has just seen the prices for everything go through the roof. And I guess this is the culmination of it, right? It's the most expensive Bronco ever. We've got the most expensive F-150s ever, but they also have the most technology and the most performance capabilities. So I guess we have to figure out where the trade-off is between inflation and what you're paying for in terms of new technologies and new goodies. But this is a very expensive truck, and it is not going to be for everybody, sadly. And look, the truth of the matter is that I would argue that at slow speeds, a Bronco Sasquatch, even that base one, is gonna give you, I don't know, 90, 95% of the fun factor. These larger tires, the better suspension certainly helps, but it's only if you start going fast that any of these Raptors really start paying off, because it's really about that extra speed and the comfort while doing it, the ability to not destroy your SUV or truck in the process. Wrapping up my thoughts with the Bronco Raptor here in 2022, this thing is outstanding at what it does. Now, it's not a perfect vehicle, it's a little noisy, it's a little rough around the edges, especially compared to the F-150 Raptor, which is a little smoother, a little bit more refined, and faster. But that being said, the fun factor here is really high, and I think that's what matters. This is the one that's gonna get you over the crazy obstacles, and it's gonna get you deeper into the bush, and it, again, that's all I can say. Fun factor is the big thing. The only other downside is that it's expensive. This is not a vehicle for the masses as tested here at over $80,000, even starting in the 70s, especially when you factor in current market pricing and ADMs and all those crazy things. Here's what I'll say. If you can't afford one of these, well, you can always get one of these. Vroom, vroom. Oh, look at me, I'm off-roading. But if you do manage to get your hands on one of these Bronco Raptors, number one, congrats. I'm sure it was a hard thing to do. And number two, just make sure you set aside some time to go play in the sand, okay? Remember to embrace your inner child and just enjoy this for what it can do, because otherwise you might as well just get a regular Bronco. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all are well and safe, and we will see you on the next video. Cheers. This is a little baby Raptor for babies.